Hello, everybody. This is Monica Guzman coming to you once again on a very late night over the weekend. Uh, this weekend, since we're going into 4th of July this following weekend, I decided to lead into the holiday. And I want to cover just a bunch of historical documents, historical people that led to Independence Day. So tonight, I wanted to kick this off with Patrick Henry's speech, which he ended with the phrase, "Give me liberty or give me death." And as I was preparing this a few days ago, I just So what's going on in America right now in 2021? You and I aren't the target of this restart, of this reset that's happening, right? So a lot of people are openly admitting that they've noticed that there's an overrepresentation of Africans on American television. And so I'm going to say that that's a psyop, right? They are conditioning you to get used to seeing Africans on American soil in positions of power, doctors, or even just in positions of high authority, of people who provide meaningful services, right? So we see a lot of commercials with Africans as doctors, as lawyers, as teachers. And obviously, all these corporations are now marketing to the African community, which I'm going to remind you is only 12% of the population. But all of this psyop that's happening on American television, or just advertising and marketing in general, you and I are not the target of those ads. Maybe the weakest among us will be brainwashed into hating themselves, will be guilted into feeling bad about who they are, the color of their skin, their ancestors. But you and I aren't the target because, and again, I bring a different perspective into this. I've been a sports fan since I was 2 years old. And I noticed a shift in professional sports definitely in 2017. It was happening before then, but it it wasn't significant enough for me to take note and then to figure out why all of this was happening. So I I only watched sports through 2017. And then 2017, when I noticed what used to be the Los Angeles Dodgers organization did with African Curtis Granderson, I kind of stopped being a sports fan, in the sense that I started watching sports talk shows, trying to figure out what exactly was happening. And so I felt that the only way to really understand was to start listening to what people in the industry were talking about. And so I started with listening to the radio, to the Dodgers radio station. And then I kept that up for a while and I started to watch the Baseball Hating Network. And that's really where I caught a glimpse into what was happening to MLB. And then from there, I moved on to a couple of sports talk shows on FS1. And then once LeBron James helped the riots break out in 2020, I stopped that. I stopped watching sports talk. or listening to sports talk. And then I've discussed already on these streams that I went back into sports talk radio when I was waiting for DJ LeMahieu to get re-signed by the Yankees. To me, it was a no-brainer. As soon as the re-signing period opens up after the World Series, I felt like it should have been done. Like what Theater Cashman was trying to create was dumb. I mean, all he did was irritate the Yankee fan base, who also wanted DJ LeMahieu back. And then when spring training hit, I stopped listening to the Michael Kay show, the voice of the Yankees, because he was calling the Yankee spring training games, and I wasn't very interested in listening to the opinions of his co-host. So as far as sports talk, I'm not in that realm anymore, but in the few years that I did listen, I picked up a lot of stuff. And so one of the things I picked up was during when the riots broke out, thanks to LeBron James, FS1 has a few shows that cater to the African audience. And I gave them a chance because I thought those men were intelligent. And so I write also. And I've been writing for several years now. And one of the cool things about writing, at least for me, is that I have to research a lot, not just because I need to know facts for my pieces, but I also have to make sure that I don't accidentally plagiarize anything that's already out there, especially on common topics. I need to make sure I bring a unique perspective on stuff. And so I actually knew about Marcus Wiley. I wrote for a client on, I was writing on college football teams at that point, and I came across, I believe it's Marcus Wiley. And so when I started watching FS1, I was like, oh, I know this guy. I know who he is. And he went to an Ivy League, and I felt like, okay, let me give this show a shot too. But then the riots broke out. Everybody who was hiding their BLM slant kind of came out. It was just allowed for the African community on sports talk to just kind of be out there with their BLM. And so one of the things that I heard was people like me, I'm already a shaped sword. I've already got my shape. I've already been hardened. So once a sword is set, you can't do anything about it. What you made. The product that you have at hand, it's done. So what they realized was that trying to change someone's mind like myself was futile. So you and I aren't the target of the propaganda. You and I aren't the target of the marketing. You and I aren't the target of the advertising. You and I are not the target of the psyop. We're already set in our ways. The target, I'm going to say, isn't even our kids. I'm going to say it's my future grandchildren and definitely my future great-great-grandchildren. So what they're doing is they're saturating television, professional sports, advertising, magazine covers with Africans, even though Africans only make up 12% of the population. They're not doing it for us. They're doing it for future generations. So what they're trying to do is paint a picture that, oh, look, the lawyers, the doctors, the professional sports dudes were Africans. And so this just kind of goes hand in hand with removing all the statues, with they're not necessarily burning books. I mean, I personally am not reading political stuff written in 2021 because I'm not interested in reading about what we need to do to live in the current era. What we need to be doing is rolling back the stuff happening right now back to Americanism, which the last time this country was really run by Americans was right before the 1960s kick in. Definitely before 1962, 1963, when those two court cases were heard and ruled against Americans when they started to remove Bible study and prayer in American public schools. So we need to roll pre 1962, 1963. We need to go before those court cases to start even remotely restoring this country. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we have to roll back all the way to the 1940s. The dollar needs to get back on the gold standard. Just we need to deflate all the inflation that's coming up. We need to reshape not the workforce, but the labor market, not the labor market, the job opportunities that are available to people. We need to go back to manufacturing. We need to go back to agriculture. And so all of this ties into, I felt it's a good time to really send this stuff home. Even myself, I had to do a little refresher on what was an anti-federalist. Patrick Henry was an anti-federalist. So I was like, okay, what was that? And so this is just a good refresher for anybody that just a good refresher for anybody that's been out of high school for like even 4 years. I don't know what you guys are learning in your high school history exams. Even if you take the AP exam, I have no idea what you guys are being taught. Again, so my go-to for American history is this wonderful book. This one was published in 1991. This is the 9th edition. This is still the textbook that is assigned to high schoolers who are preparing for the advanced placement exam, but I don't know how woke this book has become. I think they're on like the 15th edition or something like that. This is the book, the version that we were assigned. Partially, yes, because I went to a public school that was majority Mexican, and so the resources were limited. But you know what? History doesn't change. So this book being published in 1991 is not that big of a deal. And at that time, it was the latest. Copyright 91, and then previous copyrights 1987. So what I'm trying to remember is, when did the 10th edition come out? And I believe it came out quite a few years after this one. So they didn't update it right away. Now, before I dive into a great man, or this great man, historical figure, Patrick Henry. So this week was another interesting week. This time it focused on the various groups that are trying to influence American politics from the right. Now, appreciate individuals out work. It starts to get dicey when people decide that they want to be influencers, especially in the political realm. We all saw, I mean, have you not realized yet that eventually everybody ends up in the same place? They reveal something about themselves, they reveal their true platform, their true ideologies, they reveal what they're truly going for, whether it's monetary, whether they just want attention, whether they want fame. And so this week there was a blow up with Christopher Rufo, who has doing some amazing reporting on critical race theory. His crew is the crew that revealed what's happening at Coca-Cola. His crew revealed a lot of, I believe, the military stuff. But I guess he's having some sort of change of heart with feeling bad about being white, I guess. I think I saw in one clip he says he's Italian, and then I thought I saw a tweet where he says he's Irish. So this is why I encourage people to form what I call Ben Franklin groups. And the reason why I call them Ben Franklin groups is because Ben was the first person to establish fire department, or an informal fire department on American soil. And he did it because in Philadelphia during his time, he was 29 years old, there were fires. And so at that time, the way people provided heat was way different than what we have, right? And so at that time, there was way more chance that homes would catch on fire. And because homes were being built close to each other, the neighbors' homes were in peril too. If somebody's home caught on fire, if you lived next door, you were in danger too. And so we know this. In San Francisco, there were several fires, right? In the early 1900s. And so Ben Franklin formed the first fire department on American soil on a voluntary basis. And these men met to protect their neighborhoods, but they also discussed stuff. They met once a month, and they talked about other stuff. Ben Franklin is the father of life insurance and mutual insurance. And so it was groups of 30 or less. And they ended up, I believe, with 5 groups in Philadelphia. And so this notion of people getting together in small groups is very American. The Grand Army of the Republic, the person who started that was a surgeon. He started off with a group of 12 veterans. And that thing grew to hundreds of thousands and several chapters. But what's really important is that even though they attended conventions, they had local chapters where they did their thing, right? Veterans had the opportunity to get together and tell war stories. And so in baseball, American baseball, it was the same idea. So groups of men would form their teams. They would pay dues, and once a year they would attend the convention where they would vote on the upcoming year's rules. And again, this no bureaucracy. Americans get together in groups locally and then get together at a convention. It's American. Patrick Henry, in his speech, as I will read to you and discuss, did the same thing. So these influencers on the right, I feel like they're not getting anything done anyway. It's, as far as I'm concerned, one prominent one for me, it looks like he's just out for popularity. He looks like a nerd. He's very small. It's quite obvious that he's never had a blue collar job. And he called the GameStop short squeeze a distraction. The GameStop short squeeze is still happening, and people are profiting. Not only are they profiting off of GameStop, they're profiting off of AMC. I understand that right now it's very important for everybody who has GameStop and AMC to keep holding, but some people have managed to sell off some of their stock in order to make back their initial investment because they got in so early, right? And then they're just letting the rest ride because it's all profit. So that's obviously an outstanding strategy. Now, anybody who calls this a distraction obviously has something up their sleeve. I believe that this person is funded specifically by a Jewish hedge fund manager, person, owner. So that's just going to discredit that specific movement. And now it seems like there are other movements competing with this one. And it's just a lot of hot air being blown. And again, it just shows people's true colors. It's quite obvious that these groups of people are trying to become their version of Lords of the Universe, or what is it? Kings of the Universe, Lords of the Universe, or whatever. And so I want to give you an example of how the American way of getting things done works, as opposed to what these influencers on the right, they keep trying to outdo each other. This week was just another example, and it's really just a waste of time and breath. So I posted a link to a Twitter thread, the LA Times, and I want to go ahead and read to you what's going on with this. So rural California, okay, so I know California is in bad shape, right? But it's not all of California that's in bad shape. Rural California is the power, the effort behind getting Gavin Newsom into a recall election. Now, that's extremely impressive that they were able to accomplish this, given that we live among so much progressive, right? So rural California is getting stuff done in a state that everybody else has given up on. Now, I don't know if this specifically comes from rural California also, but there's so I guess because in Arizona there is an effort to audit the vote, some of that seems to be carrying over to California. Now, since I can remember, I'm going to say all the way back to about 2008, there have been calls from some California Republicans to get the California voter rolls cleaned up. I'm not 100% sure if this effort that the LA Times is trying to discredit is trying to get those voter rolls cleaned up, but it's definitely something to do with fraud and voting. So the LA Times takes a defense approach here. And I'm going to quote, with California on the brink of a nationally watched election this fall, activists are promoting their claims to raise money and recruit volunteers, as well as to propel conspiracies of stolen elections. So I'm assuming what they're referring to is the recall election, and they are trying to paint California Republicans in a negative light. So they're already starting the war against your average Californian at this point. But all we can do is push back against this, right? Or just ignore the LA Times altogether. The only people that they appeal to on something like this is obviously the progressive left, which for them it's just preaching to the choir. Because Republicans, we know, right, that this is just more nonsense. Now, what's really interesting about this specific thread is, and I quote, "The call to action is circulating among Republican women's groups, carried on social media platforms for the recall, and promoted at private dinners, church gatherings, on internet election watch conferences, and other events." So while these so-called right-wing influencers are bickering with each other on Twitter, you've got California Republican women's groups getting shit done. All right. Women in California are going to be the watchdog against voter fraud this coming election. They're doing this at private dinners, church gatherings, social media, conferences, and other events. Again, while you've got children in suits bickering with each other on Twitter, you've got Americans, Californians getting stuff done. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm encouraging more people to do. In Virginia, West Virginia, the school board stuff, they went in and they made themselves known. Atlanta, I guess school boards over there are getting an earful from Atlanta residents. More people need to stop talking and start taking action. I mean, before the LA Times reported on this, how many people even knew that this stuff was going on? And then the reason why I even paid attention to this is because I recently so I go through Twitter to find information. Sometimes the information that I'm looking for presents itself thanks to Twitter's algorithm. And I don't mind. I like the settings. It helps me stay up to date on some stuff that's going on that's of interest to me. But there are times where I'll remember someone's Twitter account and I will go and manually do a search and see what they're up to lately. So I looked up the Persistence a couple days ago. And I think maybe I will post a Twitter thread of his on this video afterwards. So the Persistence, his name's Scott. Yes, it's Scott. So Scott got his start with the Baltimore cleanup. Now, how long has that been? 2 years or so? When we first saw videos circulating of all the trash in Baltimore cities or Baltimore city streets. And he has been doing these cleanups ever since. And at the same time, he will register voters. And then he also gives presentations on how to run for local office. Now, Scott is a homosexual, and I don't know how much of what he's doing is specifically led because he ever plans on pushing forward a homosexual agenda on the American right, or if he's just doing this as an American, even though he's a homosexual. It's like me. I'm by blood, I'm 100% Mexican. And I actually think that's the 100% Mexican thing is actually probably one of the reasons why I'm so confident in my beliefs and my values. And, but I was born in this country. I was raised here. This country has been good to me. It's been good to my family. So as long as I'm on American soil, I will not go Mexican nationalist. And I understand if there's people out there who are iffy on me, and that's fine. I don't play defense. And so it's up to you to make your own decisions for yourself. But I know where I stand, and I know that I'm not going to bust a Tommy Lahren on you guys, and I'm not going to bust a Christopher Rufo on you guys, or anybody else, politicians who have backstabbed us several times. My interest is helping this country remained the beacon of freedom for the world. And so, for example, so I don't know how many of you out there watched Tim Pool's stream with Steve Bannon. And I found that I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was a good stream. I think Steve Bannon definitely has conviction. And I disagree 100% with the notion of attaching Judeo with Christian. It's nonsense. There were no Judeos signing the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. There were no Judeos when all these documents came together that led toward Independence Day. This notion of Judeo-Christian comes from the early 1900s, and now I actually believe that it comes from the critical theory crowd, the Frankfurt School. I believe it comes from those guys, so I have to do a little bit more research on that. But so Steve Bannon, again, I feel like he's good on his convictions, but you've got to, it's okay to listen to stuff like that and to gather information, but at the end of the day, you've got to you've got to be local. You've got to take care of your own home first, right? So Scott, if you go to his Twitter account, he has some pictures of his meetings, and these meetings are packed with people. I'm watching his Katy, Texas video from June. He's got a San Antonio video from June 14th. I mean, his stuff is packed, and like he tweeted, it's high energy. So I don't think he's a part of any of the movements bickering on Twitter. He's just an individual traveling, helping to clean up cities, registering voters, and educating people on how to run for local office. So I mean, I'm not going to say we should start worshiping him in case he does put forward a homosexual agenda. Then we've got to be able to pivot away from that, right? Because this is about America, the country. You cannot put your identity agendas ahead of the country. So one thing that caught my attention, besides the Judeo-Christian thing, from the Tim and Steve stream, is that I don't know why there's confusion about what the American right is. Now, Tim, I believe, hangs out on the left. So I understand why he would question it. But I think Steve should either he knows and he's just trying to get a different agenda going. But the American right starts with the founding fathers. The American right starts with the founding documents. Anything that you disagree with from those documents, you're the one going left. So I haven't figured out this like mirror video thing, but on my right, this is where America begins, with the founding documents, and there are plenty. Anything that you disagree with in terms of the founding documents pushes you to the left. And honestly, what that does, it pushes you in an anti-America direction. So the further left you are, the more anti-USA you are. So, for example, some people have a problem with prayer in public schools. Well, the Bill of Rights guarantees Americans the freedom of religion. So the founding religion of America is Christianity. So if you've got a problem with prayer at a public school on American soil, then you are anti-USA. It's just the facts. And we need, or at least I'm going to definitely start nailing that point a little bit harder, because we're not headed in a good direction. So we need to help people remember American history. And you need to remember that your ancestors were pretty awesome people. I mean, Patrick Henry is one of them. Obviously, Thomas Jefferson is another one. Ben Franklin, George Washington. And it's just, it's pretty amazing what's going on out there. So I don't understand being ashamed of your ancestry. Like, again, the Italians are pretty badass. The Renaissance Italians were, I mean, you're into science and you really like technology. The Renaissance Italians were, they're Silicon Valley. They had, I don't have it in front of me, but the barometer, the telescope, a bunch of those kinds of things came out of Renaissance Italy. Why you want to be ashamed of being Italian is beyond me. You don't know what the Italians gave to the world. And that's why you are okay with everybody morphing and nobody having an identity or a culture, like Mexican, Italian, Spanish, French, Irish, American. Like, I just don't understand why somebody would want their Italian heritage to disappear off the face of the earth. That's just, I mean, what happened to you? Like, were you not hugged enough as a child? Like, I think it's weird. I don't want Mexican culture to go away. And it's on American soil, it is disappearing. Something that is happening with Mexican culture and American soil is there is no more music. Original new music from Mexican artists. It's basically all Puerto Rican. They're the ones that brought in the reggaeton and all that. I'm sorry, to me it's degenerate. So a lot of Mexican radio stations, the really popular ones, are the ones that play the old stuff because there's nothing new to listen to right now. So that's why Vicente Fernandez is still popular, even though he passed away. Gabriel is still, I mean, you will hear their songs. So that's one of the ways Mexican culture is technically fading on American soil, because it's being overtaken by others such as Puerto Ricans, Dominicans. I'm going to assume Venezuelans is going to be something that's going to grow. So that's why a couple streams ago I said Americans, Mexicans aren't your problem. It's not Mexicans. And then here's the other thing about doing this mixture thing, that nobody's going to be able to tell if someone was originally Mexican or came from a Mexican bloodline or an Italian bloodline, because it's already happening. So Seal married Heidi Klum and they had several children together. Those children don't look like her, but she did have another child before Seal was a businessman. That daughter does look like her. So you mate with an African and you are not African, your children are not going to look like you. So basically, it's almost like you stop existing, because what you're doing is you're helping to reproduce Africans. And so I don't know what, like, your Christopher Rufo thinks that we're all going to look like in the future, but we're not going to look pale skin. They're all going to look African. I'm really shocked that somebody would be okay with that over beautiful Italians, beautiful French, beautiful Mexicans, beautiful Americans. Like, something went really wrong there. But thank you for all the work that you've done, because again, all these contributions, we should appreciate them, even when people decide to pivot in the opposite direction of the ones that you thought they were going in. So let's talk about Patrick Henry. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk Patrick Henry. So who was he? He was a really intelligent man, obviously. You don't make speeches the way he did in those days without having some intelligence. But also, he was an American attorney, a planter, a politician, and an orator. Now, what's happening today is, I don't want to get too into it, because it's one of the ways that I'm going to find the baseball players, because MLB doesn't recruit baseball players. MLB recruits bots, people that they can engineer to MLB style of play. So I know that there are tons of baseball players out there waiting to be found, and hopefully I will find you in time to help you have a career. But I want to point out that Patrick Henry, even like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, these guys weren't bureaucrats. Yes, they were attorneys and they were scientific people, but they also worked the land. So he was a planter. That means that he wasn't just some suit. He actually had roots in the land because he helped work the land. And that's really, really important. So also, he was an anti-federalist. Like I said, even I had to brush up on what was anti-federalism, because like right now what's happening with critical theory, now it's being redefined into, so critical race theory is an offshoot of critical theory. And critical theory was brought to you by the Frankfurt School, which came from Germany, which specifically came from the Weimar Jews. Now, I am wondering if some people are freaking out about that connection because you have connections to Jewish funders, which stuff like that, people are going to find out eventually. So if you've got something up your sleeve, you might as well just back off or admit it, because this dog chasing the tail thing can't keep going on and on because we're running out of time. So, Anti-Federalist, what was that? So, this group of people, the Anti-Federalists, were opposed to the creation of a strong United States federal government. So it's thanks to the Anti-Federalists that we got the Bill of Rights. Because you Americans, young Americans, you don't know that the whole point of the Revolutionary War, of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the whole point of that was to limit government. The point was to protect American citizens against the government. And now, because Americans no longer run their country, the same thing that they were trying to prevent back in 1776 is occurring. Because what's happening is culture that doesn't have the American mindset has taken over. That's why we've got so much bureaucracy. That's why we've got inflation. That's why we've got this move toward Indiaification of the United States. So again, you guys you gotta stop bickering. If your whole thing is you want power, you are messing up your own credibility, because people are going to find you out. It's just the time for this nonsense and for the dog chasing its tail is over. We've got to move on for stuff like that. And the way we move on from stuff like that is by staying local and taking care of your household and your neighborhood. And then you trickle up to the government from there. So again, the Anti-Federalists are the reason why we have the Bill of Rights. And their whole thing was they did not want a strong federal government like what we've got right now. Patrick Henry was pretty badass, right? I'm trying to see if what Patrick Henry's ancestry was. Scotland. Okay, so his father, John Henry, an immigrant from Scotland. Scottish. Okay, so let's move into Patrick Henry's speech. I am going to read this. I've got it pulled up on my screen. So Patrick Henry addressed, it was a meeting. Okay, so this was during the Second Virginia Convention, and it took place at St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. And right now what's running through my mind, is this the same church that Trump was at with the Bible, that the left going crazy over, like a meltdown? Is this the significance behind the church? Some people out there will know that better than I do. So he addressed this second convention on March 23rd, 1775. And I did post the link on this video, so anybody who wants to read this on their own, please do so. This what I'm hoping to do is just help people remember the roots of this country, because as we speak, every statue that comes down is simply an effort to turn over the table, to make it seem like you never existed. They want it to seem like Patrick Henry never existed, like Thomas Jefferson never existed. Right now, MLB is working extremely hard to make it seem like Babe Ruth never existed, and they're going to fail spectacularly. I like to think that I helped trounce the Mike Trout narrative, and I plan to do the same for Jacob deGrom, Ohtani, several of the other players that they keep promoting. They're all Dominican. Not shocking anymore, right? Because now you know, if you watched my last stream, that Dominican Republicans descend from African slaves. 90% of them have African ancestry. So that's probably the reason why MLB pushes so hard on Dominicans, even though Dominicans have a history of steroid use. And I still believe that steroids are legal in the Dominican Republic. So again, all of this stuff is, they're trying to turn over the table. They're literally erasing you. The more you refresh yourself on American history, and then you talk to your kids about it, and then your kids hopefully will talk to your grandkids about it, and so on and so forth. If people keep passing down these stories and these facts and these documents, then they cannot be, America cannot be erased. And so, again, MLB is trying to erase Babe Ruth, but they will fail. Okay, so Patrick Henry starts by saying, "No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentleman who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought of disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly things." So just in this first paragraph, he talks about God. He talks about freedom. He talks about knowing that there will be dissenting opinions, but he's diplomatic about it, right? Like, he knows he might offend some people, but he's going to speak freely anyways, because the country has arrived at a very important moment in time. And when I read this the first time, I don't remember the last time I read this one, but I thought about Tom Brady. And I don't know if any of you have seen the videos where he's being very honest, that HBO special, Okay, LeBron James put it together. But just Tom Brady's like this guy, very diplomatic, and it's no wonder that he has successfully led several teams to the championship. And congratulations to him, and congratulations to his teammates who pick winning as opposed to victimhood, as opposed to being anti-USA. This country is giving you so much. Appreciate it. People want to be Americans, and you get to be an American, so appreciate it. Following paragraph, Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of the siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. This is powerful stuff, right? He's talking Barack Obama, right? Hope. What a loser, right? Barack Obama's a loser, right? Okay. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes, which with gentlemen have been pleased to themselves and the house. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed by a kiss or with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called to win back our love? And a couple years, I put together some videos. These were just not me talking. These were videos of explaining how we ended up with each right in the Bill of Rights. I'm going to see if that channel's still up. I don't have that email address anymore. I believe I put them together 5, 6, 7 years ago or so. I'm going to see if I can find them and post them on here so you guys can see them. I'm thinking of streaming all this week at night and talking about how we got each right in the Bill of Rights. Because again, Americans, you are recipients of a beautiful legacy and culture and intelligent men, and you don't know it. You don't know it because my assumption is they don't teach you this in school anymore. I bought this book. This is like the third book I purchased. This is the third time I purchased this book. Go find it. You can find it at thrift stores. You can find it secondhand stores. You can find it for really cheap, like $5 cheap, unless I hope the prices haven't gone up on this stuff. But I encourage you to get this book. If you can find an earlier version of it, I mean, you don't need to go. Again, this one goes through the legacy of the 60s. Okay, so you might need the 9th edition. I was going to say you don't need to go into the Reagan administration, but you definitely need Nixon and you definitely need the 60s. So the 9th edition, if there's any copies out there, go find it, go get it, start reading. It's a perfect excuse with Independence Day 2021 coming up. I just encourage you guys to be self-starters, to be proactive, to stop bickering amongst you because you want attention and you want to rule, because it's not going to happen. If individuals in California are getting stuff done, you can bet that the rest of the country is going to follow suit, because in California, we are mired in progressive nonsense. If rural California is responsible for the recall of Gavin Newsom, or at least getting to the point where they force the new election, do that. Imagine what the rest of, just from the rural areas too. We don't need you. We don't need the influencers. There are no influencers leading rural California. If you want to have an impact, make an impact locally where you live, and then we'll see from there. But again, if rural California can force a recall election of Gavin Newsom, who is mired in the left, anything's possible at this point. So let's continue with Patrick Henry. Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array? If its purpose be not to force us into submission, can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? And so he's talking about right here is, if you remember your American history, so this is when the colonists started rebelling against England because England was imposing taxes, right? That's what led to the dumping of the tea in Boston. And in order to get the colonists to behave, they started to amp up their military, right? The Fourth Amendment, is it the Fourth Amendment that they cannot quarter, the Non-Quartering Act? Is that what it was called? The soldiers, the colonists had to house the soldiers. So you've got the red coat, right? Sleeping in your home, and here you are trying to rebel. It wasn't happening. And that's why you have to understand that America is blessed. So Great Britain wasn't able to keep control over the colonists because distance, right? They had an ocean between them. So the colonists were doing their thing, and Britain was none the wiser because of distance. So that's one blessing. And then you've got the French, who are trying to wage a two-way war, one against Britain and then one against the colonists. But eventually they made a choice and they went with the colonists. But France was also trying to impose its will on the soil. And so what happened was everyone's, except the colonists, right? The colonists are just defending themselves. It, so everyone's spending their resources against each other. And so you've got Britain and France going at it, and then you've got the Spaniards doing their thing. And so they wore each other out. That's really what it came down to. They wore each other out. So, I mean, if that's not a blessing for America, I don't know what is. Like, the fact that they were able to pull this off, as Patrick points out, they had nothing. They had no armies. They had no navies. Yet, they managed to win independence. And it's pretty amazing stuff. I'm sorry. I think it's awesome. And maybe I've got some Euro blood in me, and that's why I feel so strongly for this country. But I love this country. I think it's pretty great. And I think its history is pretty awesome. So let's continue. Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that could have been done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, our supplication have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve, inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be attained, we must fight. Now, I am not calling for a war. I don't think we need a war. I think we just need to trickle up. 70 million Americans voted for Trump. 70 million Americans know that something sketchy happened during the election. I mean, at this point, we know that Trump wasn't even supposed to win 2016, right? So everything that's happening right now was to set in place and motion whatever's coming next. And I hope you're ready for it. Given that you've got the Jewish community in positions of high power, or at least because consent of the governed, right? So given that you've got the Jewish community running hedge funds, running the economy, in positions of government, what are they going to do? Are they going to try to wage the Holocaust on Americans because they feel like they were wronged by Germany, and by extension, I guess, America? We don't know what kind of revenge game exactly they're playing, but there's something playing out there. What's happening to the people that went to the Capitol on January 6th, that's some serious stuff. They are being re-educated, apparently, and that's 400 people. So are they coming for you next just for existing? You don't know what's coming next, but you can prepare for it, and you can be ready for it. So let's continue with Patrick. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall be we stronger? Will it be next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? This guy's good, right? He was an orator, and I mean, I'm giggling, but I shouldn't be, because doesn't this sound like what's happening right now? This is powerful stuff. I'm really glad I picked this one tonight. Let's continue. Sir, we are not weak if we make proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the valiant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged, their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat, sir, let it come. I'm actually going to try to have my Boston presentation ready for next Saturday. I think that's going to be the ultimate lead-in for Independence Day, which this year falls on Sunday, July 4th, in case some people out there don't know. Again, I don't know what they teach you guys in school anymore. Let's continue. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the manner. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is that gentleman wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, liberty or give me death. Now, if that doesn't motivate you to do something, I'm not sure what will. This is pretty awesome, right? I am going to tweet this. It's not as long as what are we at? 220 characters. I'm going to tweet this stuff, man. This is good stuff. So tomorrow I want to start talking about Thomas Jefferson and his, I think it's the second draft of the Declaration of Independence. So I am going to leave you with, read Patrick Henry's speech for yourself, get motivated. God, you just want to run through a brick wall after that? I think Thomas Jefferson should rev your engines too. Remember, this country is the beacon of freedom of the world. Let's not let it disappear. Let's not let it get erased. Let's keep moving forward. Just restarting the country and preventing the reset. So I want to wish you guys a good night. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. I will be back here tomorrow, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or very close to it, given that there are no distractions. I don't think there's any sporting stuff happening. So, again, my plan is to stream every night this upcoming week, through 4th of July, and I'm just talking about stuff you should have learned in your history classes. And read it for yourselves and learn it for yourselves and talk about it and get motivated. All right. So I will see you guys tomorrow night. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you.